Welcome to Lead Poison.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Lead Poison podcast, brought to you by youcanpaint.com.au. Head to youcanpaint.com.au for issue 1 of the how-to series, How to Paint Your House and Save Thousands. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jack, your host. Today we sat down with Sid Tapia, a prolific Sydney artist, a father, a skateboarder, a man of faith. It was an absolute honour to have him on the show, and I really enjoyed our chat. Head to Sydney, Sidney, Tapia, Tapia.com to check out his work. It's incredible, and I hope you enjoy the show. So without further ado, please welcome Sid Tapia. Cracking. We're sitting here with Sid Tapia, Sydney artist. Sid, thanks for joining us, man.
Sweet, thank you, Jack. Awesome.
How's your day been? How's life? How's is the current situation sort of treating you?
Good. Like it's good. I think more than anything, we're comfortable as a family. We're comfortable. 2 kids, wife. Which is good, we're fairly comfortable, nothing's ever certain, obviously. Life's always got ups and downs with a whole lot of things, but we're good, in that sense. It's just, I think the thing that bums me out is the reality of other people that may be feeling really uncertain, and they may not have that many people to turn to, I just think far out how amazing, I've got a family, I've got loved ones. But if you're by yourself and you got to choose like one person to hang with, well, that's it's people need people. So it really bums me out that all this sort of stuff is psychologically playing a lot of havoc on certain people's lives. So that's the thing that I think is frustrating me more than anything, I think.
Yeah, definitely, man. I feel for. I've got a few friends that are that live by themselves in units, and yeah, I try and call them when I can, but yeah, you're exactly right. It's got to be tough, man. Kids and a girlfriend or a wife keeps you busy, but yeah, if you're by yourself, it's got to be tricky for sure.
Fully, man, fully. And that's the thing. Like, I think one good thing about it is like if you can create, get busy, do things, show some initiative that way instead of just taking some easier route. Where we can easily just sit down and watch a screen or whatever. I think just numb our minds even more, and it can be really depressing.
Yeah, totally, man, for sure.
Yeah.
So are you into the you're doing homeschooling? You've got 2 kids. Two girls.
Yeah, 2 girls, 9 and 5. So homeschooling. Yeah, and my wife's been amazing. She's pretty much just taken the reins there. Working on a commission at the moment, which has been good. I've got a studio upstairs from where we live. This is where I am right now, and so the kids are downstairs, doing their homeschooling, and my wife's just having to maintain that and just taking charge. Yeah, because she's taken a step back from what she's doing. She's looking at wanting to get out more with her art career as well.
Okay, right,
yeah. So she's man, she's just having to bite the bullet, so to speak, and just spend all the time with the kids and make sure they're onto it. So yeah.
Has it affected your work at all in terms of your art and things like that?
Yeah, well, last year it definitely did. Like things were really quiet, but that was I had to turn that into an opportunity to do other things, and that's where I focused a lot on oil painting. So because it was quiet and things were all over the shop, people, there was a bit more of a panic as well. So outdoor work was a no-go, because people were like, no one wanted to go outdoors. People didn't know what was going on. And in saying that, it was, a couple of months just of nothing going on. So I just put myself out there a lot to say, hey, like with the people that I know, the connections that I have, relationships that I have, I'm like, hey man, if you want something done, let me know. Like no charge. I just want to do something and
just keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I can come up with ideas myself, which is well and good. But when you got people that support you or that, love what you do, then it's rad to be able to find opportunities like that to still create something and put your work out there to be able to, stay busy yourself or stoke people out. Whereas now this year it's been different. People are a bit more relaxed, so I've still been able to get some work, and a lot of it has been indoor work, which is great as well. So it's been panning out really well that way, and also starting to get some. I've been working on a oil painting at the moment that I'm working on just here, and that's been great as well. And just getting into the whole oil painting thing and putting stuff into comps and staying busy with that has been a lot of fun. It's a new medium. Basically, it's a new medium that, for me, it's a new medium that I only started delving into, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I think
right.
2 years ago. Yeah. I looked back the other day on my Instagram, like, when did I start this one oil painting? And I think it was around just before the first lockdown thing, and it's just been a rad medium to just explore, man. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't think it looking at your work that you've only been dabbling in that for 2 years, man, because some of that stuff's really impressive.
Thanks, man.
It's really good. Now, I do want to get into a little bit of your history and your past, but you have recently we were speaking on the phone the other day, and you did recently get accepted as one of the 40 finalists in the Leicester Prize.
Yeah.
Now, for the listeners that don't know, the Leicester Prize, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sid, is it's one of the country's premier portraiture art prizes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that's obviously big news for you. Now, you painted a man, I believe his name is Sia.
Yep, that's right.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that came about and why you chose to paint him?
Yeah, for sure. So I get, if we go back a little bit as to why him, like I growing up in the city all my life, spending a lot of time there, being born and raised in Sydney and in the city, and you get, and wanting to be out in the streets a lot, you get to just see what life is like out in the streets, and you get to meet a whole lot of people that are regulars out in the streets, and obviously that's going to be homeless people. So I'd get to meet a lot of people and get to hang and just fellowship and have a good time with people that just you can't really see all the time on your way back home. Skating back somewhere, you see, hey, what's up? You chill, you hang, but so I've always just that's just been that way inclined. So when I paint, I was like, what could I paint? What do I want to paint? A lot of the times I paint people that could be well recognized, or people that have excelled in areas of their craft or whatever it may be. And I love doing that, because there's a spirit of excellence on people's lives that way, and I think that's a great thing to be able to put out there. And then obviously that's one way a lot of people see it, but then at the same time, every human being has that sense of excellence in one way, form, or another. And a lot of the times I find when it comes to people that are living on the streets or whatever, their sense of excellence may be overlooked quite easily until you start chatting with them and you talk. I love how you can just have these rad convos where you can just be so upfront, because you're being upfront. You can just be upfront and be like, so why are you on the streets, or what happened? Like, what are you doing? And not probing, but just genuinely wanting to know, because simply because I'm willing to share those areas of my life where things have failed as well, and just to be able to relate, because we're human, and then from that, striking up those convos, you end up seeing, you just see the person for who they are. They were once a child, which is so beautiful and well cared for and lovely, and then society can look at them and just want to overtake them, so to speak. And that's a very unfortunate way of looking at people. But in saying that, I thought, I want to go out and be able to, because I love portrait painting. I was like, I want to be able to paint people and get models and pay for them and that sort of thing. But then I was like, well, if anyone would like to be paid, it's probably more people that don't have as much money.
Yeah.
So, you know,
For sure.
if you're doing it as a job, and that's all well and good, you'll get heaps of people that will want you to do your thing. But if there's someone always continuously asking for money, then hey, how about hanging, chilling for a bit, and offering them to be of service to you and paying them some money for that. But at the same time, share a relationship.
So you're saying that because I had a look at the prizes. I had a look at a lot of the entrants as well, and there's some really good paintings in there. Yours is right up there. I mean, it's really good work. But you're saying that Sia would somehow benefit if you were to go through to the next level or to win the competition?
Oh, yeah, that too. Like, so well, I already helped him out.
Right.
Like
Okay.
when we chatted and when we hung.
Yeah.
But I even told him, I was like, dude, if we win, like it's a joint effort. I'm like, if we win, then you got to take some of the sharings, man.
That's
And he's like,
beautiful, man.
oh, that's all right. He's so kind and humble, and yeah, it was a beautiful thing in the sense that, like, when I met him in particular, it was just a matter of, I just told Anime, my wife, I was like, I just want to go out and paint, look for someone to paint and go shoot some photos. I love shooting photos as well. So yeah, ended up coming across. I thought, well, where could I go find someone? I went out towards Pitt Street and found him really quickly. The first encounter was just driving through the city. And I pulled up at Pitt Street and I saw a guy there, and I'm like, I quickly pulled in, and then I turned back and I asked him, I was like, hey, as I walked up to him, he was just asking me for money. And I'm like, yeah, cool, I can give you some money, man, but do you mind if we just, have a chat? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then we just started chatting, and but yeah, we chatted, helped him out with some money, and then asked him if I could take some photos. He was so sweet. And, we got to share a little bit, have a good convo for, I don't know, I think it was like maybe 20 half hours, something like that. And then he was really cool. He was shooting photos. He was just a real sweet guy that's gone through obviously heaps of stuff. But it's so lovely when you can see people that are so downcast, but the moment you start talking to them and just asking them questions as simple as, whatever it may be, they just open up and you see the beauty of who they are. And
Totally, man.
and in that, you're like, oh, dude, as I was talking to him, I'm like, man, you're a really top looking bloke, like he looks really cool. And even though he was, his attire may have been whatever, but it's like, regardless, you just look at that and like, this is awesome. And then he must be able to see that I'm feeding off that as well, and vice versa. And yeah, come up real nice. So so that's, in short, that's sort of how it sort of started panning out with him. And at first, with the excitement that I had, I was like, oh, this is great. Got the photos, we helped out. And then as I bailed, I was like, oh, hold on, I did the paintings of him, and I didn't think about prizes or anything, because I didn't know about portrait prizes at all, because I'm so new to it all. I didn't, and my wife had mentioned if she's been in some like art prizes and stuff, but I was just, I guess I had my blinders on. I was just doing my work and doing my thing, and then I'm like, oh, let me suss out some prizes. And I'd already painted about two. I think I'd painted two of his portraits already.
Okay.
And I sussed out some prizes, and one of them was a miniature portrait prize. And I was like, oh, no way. And I looked at the date. It was last entries were for the next day. I entered it in. I got accepted, and I got put into the exhibition. I was like, dude, this is sick. And then I was like, oh, but I felt weird, because I'm like, okay, I'm putting Sia out there now. And I could justify it and go, oh, yeah, I already paid him money to, model or whatever. But, I still felt there was a bit more substance there. So I was like, I got to go look for the dude.
Oh, okay.
and let him know what's going on. Because, and just to share some good news that he got accepted into this miniature portrait prize, which was the first one that I entered into just recently.
Okay.
And
did you find him?
Well, that's the epic story. This is what's crazy. I'm like, okay, I'm about to go back into the city of Sydney, and I got to look for a homeless dude.
Yeah.
Like,
could be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh man, it's been a few months. So I was like, oh, what do I do? All right. So I was like, Lord, I was like, Lord, help me find this dude in the city, like, because I really want to be able to let him know what's going on and help him out a bit more and blah blah blah. And I'm like, it's in your hands. So I was like, I went out. I told my wife I'm going out. Got out at Town Hall Station, and dude, 10 minutes later, I thought I'll just go to the same spot. And 10 minutes later, I see a dude there with a shaved head and kind of heavy set, no beard, like, because in the first portraits I did, he's got the beard and everything. And I was like, I looked at him, I was like, see ya. And he turned around and he's like, oh, hey. And I was like, dude, I had to tell him the story. And he was like, oh, no way. That's awesome. I was like, yeah, dude, this is sick. So, yeah, and it was sort of we hung out, talked more. I was able to help him out again, told him, like, hey, he got accepted in this, into that first portrait prize, which was not the Leicester one, but the one before that. And he was like, oh, that's really cool. And that's when I said, oh, hey, I want to enter you into some other prizes as well. And if that's cool with you, he was like, yeah, cool. And then I said, and that's where I shared with him saying, hey, if we win or whatever, then obviously, it's a joint effort. So you got to take some of this money. Yeah.
Nice, man. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool.
Yeah, man. That's really nice. I think, what you said about people sort of, I've hung out back in the day with various types, people living on the streets and whatnot. And 5 seconds in, you realize the beauty in people, straight away. And they might just not fit into, a particular part of life that requires them to live how everyone else does. But straight away, you can see that most people are just pretty much amazing and they've got their own story to tell. So, yeah, that's a really beautiful story,
exactly.
Man. So that's an oil painting?
Yeah. So they're all oil paintings. So I've done 3 of his so far. So I've got 3 and one other one with the shaved head, which is the one that I showed you on. You probably seen that one.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think I've seen. Yeah, is that the same guy?
So that's Sia, yeah, but without his shaved head. And so that's that was on the second encounter.
Wow.
And that's for the Moss Foundation. It's going to be an exhibition that's going on. Hopefully, if everything works out well, it's going to be run through Ambush Gallery, and a whole bunch of skateboards are being painted. So on the second encounter with the shaved head and everything, that's where I took some more photos of him, because I said, hey, man, like, may as well take some more pics of you because I might want to paint you.
Yeah.
And then the Moss Foundation got in touch with me about painting something on a skateboard, and I thought, well, I'll paint Sia again. So yeah, right.
So, what's the Moss Foundation?
They're a foundation that it's a non-profit that just they help set up water systems over in Africa for people to have fresh water over in Africa. But they set up the system, like actual water systems for fresh water to be given out to the people there. And the way, I'm sure they do a whole lot of work, but when I was introduced to them through actually an old acquaintance, through an old skate sponsor that I had, he contacted me saying, we run this exhibition that we get all these people to do artworks on skateboards, and then then they go on sale, like they get auctioned off, and all the money goes to that cause. Yeah, so none of it goes to the actual admin or anything. It all just goes directly to setting up these things. So yeah, they hit me up for that, and yeah, so it should be happening soon.
Yeah, right, man. That's nice. Well, I do want to get into your art specifically, but if you don't mind, I'd like to take you back. I don't know how comfortable you are, but just to your early days.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, I've met you before a long time ago. I saw you recently, just briefly in the inner west, just cruising around. But I've met you a few times skating in the city and Cannonball back in the day, and probably in the early 2000s, and whatnot. But and I always thought that there is a story I want to tell you that sort of involves me and you personally, and I did actually hit you up and tell you. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about your childhood per se, and how you became how you became an artist and where it sort of started. I know you were born in Sydney, raised in Sydney. Your parents are Ecuadorian. Where did you get introduced to art? What was the moment? Where was the first introduction
Yep.
to art? Was it in the household or at school?
Yeah, it was definitely in the household.
Mm.
I would have seen it around me, which I did, because I know that I had I still do have my uncle who used to paint and play guitar. And when I'd go to his house, and I'd see that he'd have some paintings up on and I'd ask, well, who did that? I remember still wanting to know, and he'd be like, well, I did it. And I'm like, whoa, he painted. I remember one, it was like this Ecuadorian young boy I think he even had a pipe, but it was a boy, and I found that really interesting. And he'd have all these other little things he'd do, these pattern making things that he'd do with nail and string, and just awesome, almost psychedelic looking type patterns, and play guitar as well. And
yeah, cool.
He was very agile. So I'd see that as a young kid, but then actually putting pen to paper was through my mum, who has amazing handwriting and real traditional Spanish cursive writing. Yeah, so I would see that and be just attracted to it. I'd just be like, wow, that's got an amazing, aesthetic. I guess that's the only way I could explain. As a little kid, I would have been about like 3, but I was just intrigued, going, this is awesome, and I'd want to copy it as well. I'd be wanting to do as she did, basically. So then she would see that I had that inclination of wanting to go that way, and she would also she'd have some old textbooks from Ecuador as well that she had as a kid that would teach how to handwrite in this sort of format. Because if you look at her generation of people that just the way they write, it's just beautiful. It's like something out of it's just beautiful script. It's just amazing handwriting, and it's all cursive. And that was just a given thing that all kids learn how to write that way.
So it was just maybe taught in schools and things like that. It wasn't for any artistic purposes.
No, not at all. That's just the way you had to handwrite,
Nice.
So she would teach me that, and the textbooks were really cool. That they had the light lines and the gridded lines, but all in regards to this hand style of cursive writing. So I would sit there and just learn that, and I would copy her. I'd ask her, how do you do, this letter, or how do you do that letter? And she'd do it, and I'd always be copying it, and then she'd, just be able to say, no, actually, put the loop a little bit bigger here, or do this. And so I was fascinated with that, and then fascinated with wanting to have, at a really young age, just wanting to have my own signature as well, and in that sort of form of handwriting. So I think when I look back and I go, okay, what was I learning there? It's like I was learning, at the end of the day, I was just learning how to manipulate a tool. I was learning how to manipulate a pen or anything that I put in my hand that I could then make a mark with. So
definitely,
that's what it was teaching me. And then from there, if I saw something else that interested me, I'd be then wanting to, draw. If it was a comic or if it was a family member, I'd want to draw them and try to really represent them as well as I could with a pencil or something.
Yeah, definitely. And so I know you've done a little bit of graffiti as well. Where did that come into the scene? Was that sort of in high school or?
Mm-hmm. I think I got introduced to it when I was around 10. Being, I don't know how many years back that is now. Well, 37 years ago. I'm 47 now, 48 next year. But so that was early to mid 80s, I think. And then so I got introduced to it. And then when I went into year 7, I was just really, not wanting to focus at school. I just wasn't into school at all. And I wasn't really into wanting to hang with many people. I like coming from a really, I guess, broken home life, a lot of hostility, a lot of craziness in the home, when it comes to, just a lot of pain abuse, mental, physical, a whole lot of craziness going on. You know, upbringing was pretty wild in many ways. So that, to me, it was always a sense of like, I want to be out of the home. I don't want to be around that environment. I want to be out. So that's what led me to the streets a lot. But when it comes to like the friends that I'd choose, you ended up finding, you know, the wind sort of blows something of the same substance in the same direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
man,
like
sure.
I'd be gearing towards people that probably going through the same sort of stuff. And when I look back at it, they were, you know. So I'd be hanging out with other dudes that were just wanting to, you know, run a mark or not wanting to focus or whatever, just wanting to still have a good time, but not fitting in and feeling highly insecure and scared, I guess, at the end of the day, but still just being a kid where you want to fit in. So yeah, and being inclined towards the aesthetics and art, etc. It just led to being attracted to even bigger forms of artwork. When I'd catch a train to go to school, I just started, or that's when a lot of pieces just started popping up on the train lines, you know, and it tripped me out because it looked so good, but it was so much bigger than what I was doing. But at the same time, I'm like, I recognized that stuff from whether it was because I saw, you know, the old breakdance film or Beat Street or whatever, or some, you know, maybe seeing Rocksteady Crew or, you know, and I used to do a lot of breakdancing as well. So I used to have a whole lot of tapes, of like breakdancing tapes of anything that in some way represented breakdancing. I'd want to record it like on a weekend. And so I really got into that culture, and I wanted to have everything that they had when it came down to the dress sense and everything. I was highly attracted to that. And then from there, the outer environment of breakdancing, the way the media showed it was there was graffiti. So, and because I was attracted to the art, I'd be like, oh, wow, that's cool. And then I'd, you know, just nerd out and want to do my own little thing in regards to graffiti and search those things out. But when that started popping up on walls in Australia, it really took me aback. I'm like, whoa, it's here as well. Oh, wow, I find it fascinating. And because I wasn't such a structured kid, you know, I'd be like, well, I want to see how I can get involved that way. And that's when it came down to the friends I was meeting at school who we just ended up going out bombing heaps and yeah, we ended up forming some crews together, being part of some crews that were, I guess, well known back in the city of Sydney back
Man.
in the day.
That would have been that's kind of like the golden era of, you know, when hip hop landed in Australia back in those days. That's a massive moment for the culture in general.
Yeah, it tripped a lot of people out because there was so like when we were at. See, for me, it wasn't with the guys I was hanging with. It wasn't so much about we had a guy who was a year above us, and we saw his artwork and we were like, this guy is the best. And fun thing was he used to put up Best as well, BST.
Yeah, okay.
And he used to put up a whole lot of other things like Sense One, Stations 5, Vanism, and Best. And he gave, as a young little impressionable grommy, he gave me the name Sense One and Stations 5. He said I could put that up. And I was like, oh, dude, this is gnarly, because I was extremely young for a year 7 kid. I was only like 11 years old and just turned 11 because I started school really young.
Yeah,
so
wow, okay.
I was a lot younger. So I was like this, like so much more impressionable.
Ready to go,
year 8 dude who's like so sick at art. And he was amazing. Like he got put into like one of the best crews from back in the day in Sydney, which was RCF, Rock City Funk. And, you know, they put him into that. And I was just like, dude, it was just amazing just to see this dude doing his thing. But for us, it was like, we're just AMs, you know, we're like these amateurs just wanting to go out and just tag heaps. So for us, it was more about, for me and my buddy Cy and Dewan was especially, it was all about just tagging and hand styles heaps, you know, and that's what it was consistently about, like fanatically about, to the point where we ended up having these uncontrollable hand habits of always just tagging.
Yeah.
We'd be walking around. We'd wake up in the morning just practicing
just doing
hand
air
styles
tags.
with our fingers. It was so funny. We look back at it because it was so compulsive that way.
Yeah.
But then, so that sort of lived out for me till probably about year 9, and a sudden halt happened because of a major train accident that I went through.
I listened to your podcast with Ryan Rees.
Yeah.
Sorry, and if you don't mind, let's talk about that. So what happened? You had an incident on a train when you were out sort of hanging out and just experiencing that adventure, and it kind of, as you said, brought things to a little bit of a halt in terms of your graffiti. Tell me a little bit about that day.
Sure. I remember those days really well because I look back and I go, wow, how sweet, but how wild that you just wouldn't see those things happen anymore. But basically, what my basic routine was, I'd get on my train at Martin Place, back carriage, I'd pop the doors. Back in the day, that you just have to get the back seats. You just pop the back seats and pop the gas out, and the doors will just be open. And you just run through the tunnels from Martin Place to Redfern. As soon as you come out of the tunnels there, and you could just hang out because the doors were just, busted. You just bomb away in the back carriage. And, but I'd have things happen to me like, it was cool. I ended up, long story short, I met 2 girls a few months before that. 2 girls at Rockdale train station. They saw that I had bomber laces on, and they were like, "Oh, are you a bomber?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah."
Let's hang.
Little 11-year-old or something. And there's these 2 girls that were bigger than me. They're probably like 2 years. They were 2 or 3 years older than me. And I was like, these girls are cool, and they're probably thinking to me, "Oh, this little kid's cute," because I was so tiny. I was quite a dwarf as a kid.
Okay, yeah.
and got my bomber laces on, thinking I'm all that. And so they're like, "Hey, let's hang." And I'm like, "Yeah, sweet." And we just catch a train. They had to go actually the opposite way, and I would always go in the city, but we'd always meet up at Rockdale. But then they used to start coming into the city to meet me at Central Station, and then we'd catch a train back to Rockdale, and they'd get off at Cogra. And what the whole purpose of that is like, "Hey, we'll come and meet you at Central. And I'll be like, "Yep, I'll have the back doors ready."
Organized.
Jump in, and then let's go to town. So that was a usual thing on a school week, and it was just one of those days. And then on one of those days, they came in, they met me at Central, doors were open, and they had a friend. And man, she said, "What's up?" She was cool, usual routine, just start bombing and stuff. And then coming out at, because they got on at Central, next stop was Redfern, then from Redfern, Erskineville. And then as the train comes out at Redfern into Erskineville, it starts going up the hill to go out into the open. Train slows down a lot. As it's slowing down, it's changing tracks, and it goes to and fro quite a lot from side to side. What I was hanging out from Redfern to Erskineville in the tunnel. As I'm tagging, I got pulled in by my friend Tracy, who was that new chick that just started hanging out with us. I'd met her. I think I had met him like maybe twice before that, but she was just new, I guess. I was sort of still getting to know her. And anyway, she pulled me in as we're coming out of the tunnel, and I was like, "What's up?" I thought maybe there was D's coming. We used to call cops D's back in the day, but I was like, "What's up?" She goes, "Oh, I heard there was D's in this area, just as you're coming out." And she had heard that there was D's taking photos, because that's when graffiti was just taken over. So people were like, "What the hell is going on?" So they were trying to do anything they can to catch these young kids doing whatever they're doing. Anyhow, I was like, "Okay, cool." And this is in a matter of 20. When I timed it, it was around 23 seconds. All this happened because I just relived it one time. She's pulled me in. And what's happened was, because the doors were busted, there used to be a pole right in the middle, in between the two doors. What she's gone ahead and done is, as I've turned back, I've sort of just looked to the side to just keep on tagging on the inside of the train. But what she's gone ahead and done is grabbed the pole and looked outside and just popped her head out a little bit, just to see if there was any people, any Ds taking photos. So we passed that sort of like danger area where the cops could have been. And what she's gone ahead and done is just popped her head out just to see if there was anyone in that area. But as she's done that, that's when the train was changing tracks and wobbling to and fro. And the oncoming Bridgewater Erskineville train station just whacked the back of her head and spat her out. And it made this hideously loud noise that I remember looking down the carriage, and even people that were sitting on the carriages looked back. And then one of the girls I was with, because there was 3 girls and myself, and then one of them was like, "Where's Tracy?" And we looked around. I looked out at the train, and I just saw her there, just lying on the rocks. And that, dude, that was nuts. I still remember, just ditching everything that we had, and knowing that the next stop was out at Sydenham, because the trains didn't stop at Erskineville or St. Peters. And then having to just run up the carriage to get to the guards compartment to tell them to don't let any more trains come in, just in case. And it was, there was a lot that happened after that. But the crazy thing for me that ended up coming to a realization even more, even to this day as I speak of it, it's so easy for me to just probably just get teary-eyed over it all and well up, is because of the whole incident. And I was so traumatized as a kid by that accident as well, and having to relive it and realize that she unknowingly saved my life, because I was completely hanging out the train. I still remember I was putting up a different name at that time. It was Theme, Feme, and I still remember putting it up and had I think it was maybe like a goldish touch up or something like that. And it was just nuts, man, because I still remember doing it, and I still remember getting pulled in, and all that happened in like it's like my life was completely spared in 23 seconds. And I thank God to this day that she's alive. She suffers from migraines on a daily. We've caught up and had to relive all that, which was really full on, because she didn't know what had happened to her. And I got in touch with her a few years back, just wanted to reach out to her, and that was really hard on both of us, especially her, because she hadn't known what had happened to her all these years, and I had to tell her, because I was the only one.
She didn't remember the incident at all?
No, all these years she had been thinking that what happened to me that day that changed her life around, because she suffers from migraine. She had maybe some brain damage as well. It was really heavy, because the back of her skull was just completely gone. And when we caught up, through all that heaviness of us having to communicate via messaging, she hadn't known whether someone pushed her out that day, whether I pushed her out or friends pushed her out, or whether she slipped, and I knew what happened. And man. So
wow.
Yeah, it was just it's one of those things where we got to catch up, and she's so graceful as well, because she sees what I do now. And I had to tell her what I get up to these days. I was like, hey, I actually got back into it again. Like, I was telling her I got back into it. My first daughter was born, and for me, I told her, for me, it's now about, I still love the art form and everything that we enjoyed when we were kids, but I want to be able to, do it for good and stoke people out and bless people's lives with it, rather than just wanting to run amok like we used to. I saw the trouble that it got us into, and it's to have her life spared as well as mine is just a massive wake up call. Yeah, man. And it definitely traumatized me as a kid. So every time I'd go tag or bomb after that, because it's kind of like a habit, you know what I mean? It's like you want to go skating, or let's just go skating. But if you have a major accident in skateboarding, you're not going to just step on your board and be ready to just go again. You're going to have, you know, a bit of nerves going on. But that accident was so heavy to the point where every time I go and tag, I'd uncontrollably be shaking.
Okay, wow.
For a long time. And I dabbled a little bit more, like on the illegal side a little bit after that, around the age of 15. And so 15 or so, I started getting up again with a few little things and formed another little crew with a mate of mine who skated. But it was never the same, man. It was like being so young, you don't kind of realize, you know, how fragile life is, you know?
Yeah, man. When you I'm 30 now, and looking back on when I was younger, things that you thought wouldn't affect you, you definitely start to think about into your 30s, especially once you have children, I find. And I mean, obviously that incident would have been pretty obvious that it was going to have an effect on you because it was so major. But
yeah.
So did you stop? I know around that time, is that when you sort of got into skateboarding?
Well, yeah, like I've been skating since I was 3 or so. Like they're my first big memories of skateboarding. My older brother, his name's Walker. He was like my father figure growing up, because my father had left when I was 3. They parents split up. So he's 7 years older. So he was the next. Now that my dad was gone, it was like, well, there's this other male role model I got now, and that was my brother Walker. So he would skate. He had his skateboard around the house, and he would try to learn things, and I'd be watching what he's doing, just, you know, fanning out on him, and just always had skateboards around the house. Yeah. So then when we moved to another neighborhood, we had more space, and he's such a leader, you know, he's such an initiator. He'll be like, okay, it's now footy season, now it's cricket season, now it's bike season, now it's skateboard season. He'd always make it fun, like, oh, okay, cool, bike season, oh, cool, skate season. When it was skate season. Yeah, so rad like that. And, you know, we'd go out in the open spaces and draw marks, like tracks with chalk on the pavement, and we had these little embankments that we'd use as obstacles. And so that was always just a given. There was always seasonal areas of skateboarding and that sort of thing. But yeah, definitely after that accident, a few years later, when I was about 15, I met up with one of the boys at my friends at school, Tony Lopez. He was the guy that I was hanging with and tagging with a bit. But we first met out of skateboarding because I was starting to get into it more, and we just got to hang, and he told me he could ollie, and ollies were a new trick back then. This is 88, I think 88, 87. So ollies were a really new trick, and kickflips were just about to come out. And anyway, he told me he could ollie like this high. So what's that? Like about a foot and a half. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's a tosser. Like, I'm thinking, a foot and a half. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. You know, he was a really great athlete. And he was like this man child at school, you know, like he had the six pack and the pecs and everything. And the dude's in like year 10, and he was like the fastest. He was really, really smart at school. And
getting all the girls.
We just became mates. You know, we just became mates in an odd way. He reckons I slapped him in the back of the head and ran away the first time he met me. And I was like, really? I did that? He was like, yeah, you little smart ass. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. And he goes, yeah, that's what you did, man. I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, I remember in the lineup, I was like, oh, can you ollie? You know, and he goes, yeah, he told me that high. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, whatever. He goes, can you ollie? So I'm like, yeah, I couldn't ollie. He goes, yeah. I go, yeah. And he goes, how high? And I'm like, oh, about this high, which is about the size of a curb or whatever. I could not ollie, dude. And then he puts me into it. He goes, oh, cool, man. He goes, hey, how about we go for a skate this weekend? And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this sucks. I've got to go learn how to ollie now. And I think from what I remember, I had a day to learn, and I went back after going home. I was I practiced my heart out, dude, to learn how to ollie, man, on grass and on, putting the board in the cracks so it would be stationary. Tried everything, and then it wasn't working. I remember going inside late at night and being in front of the mirror. Like, I still remember like trying to get the ollies going, and finally did one. I was like, oh my gosh, it looks like I'm lifting the wheel up, and I was tripping. And then the next day we met up in the morning. We meet up with this other guy, Bernard. They had the sickest boards as well. Like, one dude had like cobwebs on his board. Like, the grip tape was made of like, it was grip, but it was cobwebs, and I'm thinking, dude, that's sick, And then Tony's got his board, and then they just had their out of school uniform, and they got some fresh clothes on. They had their high top cons on and this and that. And I come from pretty like poor sort of upbringing. I don't know what I was wearing, but I guess I was trying to probably make it look cool. But so we go for a skate, and we meet up at Central Station, and Tony's like the man, so he's leading the way, pushing, and then there's Bernard, and then there's me, and then we get to this. We're going to this spot that he knows of. He says, and I'm like, all right, cool, and we're just skating, trying to style out this sort of thing, and then Tony sees a curb that he leads us towards to go up, and he goes to ollie up it, and the dude ollies about 1.5 feet up onto this curb, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. But I'm having to keep my cool,
Yeah.
Like, and then
Don't stand out.
Fully, and then he looks back to see us do it, and I'm like, what the hell? I only learned how to do it in front of my mirror the night before. I'm thinking, oh gosh. So I've got to keep cool here. So he looks back to see Bernard, gives it a shot. He gets up onto it. Then it's my turn. I'm pushing, and I'm like, I go up to it. I try everything I can. Ollie, dude, I got up onto the curb 90. Right,
yeah.
90 degrees. I got
to
up
get that
90.
extra distance.
Bro, I got up. Can you imagine how elated I was?
100%, man.
But I couldn't show it because I told the dude that I could ollie this big. So inside I was screaming, but on the outside I was straight faced and like, yeah, keep my cool, keep skating. But inside I still remember just looking down going, what the hell I just did?
There's nothing like a bit of pressure to make you learn quickly, eh?
Oh mate, it was so sick. But so that yes, that kicked in a lot of skating after that, like, and hanging with those boys. Like, then from there it was like I just didn't turn back. It was a daily thing after that. Yeah
man, and I assume it still is.
It is, as much as I can. The body doesn't want to do it as much because of all the accidents, all the injuries I've had, like knees, everything. So
speaking of which, what's happened to your wrist?
My wrist, that's from painting way too much, from spray painting way too much.
Oh, so really?
Yeah. Like with the old valves on the 94s, they're a little bit tougher. So with all the jobs I'd be doing, a lot of the times when I'd paint from like maybe, probably like 6:30 in the morning to about maybe 7 at night.
Yep.
And then some days I'd go from 6:30 and then I'd go till the next morning, till 6:30 the next morning.
That's it.
If I was doing like indoor jobs and stuff, and I just amped, when you're just really into something and
just keen to get it done.
Yeah, just psyched. And then from there, like I just overdoing it too much, so ended up getting a few problems that way, and just tendonitis as well up in the elbow, like the tennis elbow thing. But now it's just, the reason I bandage it so much now is just to keep it stationary, because the blood flows a lot smoother that way. Whereas my old painting style was very much just keeping my wrist way up, which stops a lot of the circulation, just like you'd stop a hose. You know what I mean?
Sure.
When you stop a hose from running out water. Yeah. So because I'd be in that tense position for so long, it'd stop a lot of blood flow, which starts causing a lot of damage, like in the tendons and nerves and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I guess landing on it from skateboarding wouldn't help either. That
too, yeah. I did have issues with that with skating throughout the years, so I used to bandage it up even with skating.
Yeah. So just on the topic of skateboarding, so you were a professional skateboarder at around 21, 22?
Yeah. Sponsored, I'd say sponsored at that age, yeah, which was kind of late for me back then. Yeah, sponsored, and it was one big thing because I didn't have anything before that. But I took a trip to Queensland. My friend, one of my closest friends, Mickey Ewan, got hooked up directly through Mike McGill, the old Bones Brigade member. Mike McGill, he had a company called Chapter 7.
Okay.
And he saw Mick skate at a demo and tripped out and was like, dude, do you want to skate for my company?
He was an amazing skater, Mick.
Yeah, man. He's just incredible. So brilliant, so brilliant, so technical and a great style as well. And and we lived in the same neighborhood, and I'm older than Mick, so he'd heard about me and my skateboarding that I was doing back in Alloa, Kempfield. That used to be like my local park, and I lived there basically. And he knew of me as being one of the main skaters out that way, and so we sort of got to meet and hang here and there. But then he was a lot more structured and studious, and he still is to this day. And he'd come out on the weekends and we'd hang. And I still remember he told me at Rockdale Station, he was like, oh man, I got approached by Mike McGill, got sponsored by Chapter 7. I was like, what? Dude, that's amazing, man. But inside I'm going, oh man, I would love to be sponsored too. And he told me who hooked him up, and it was these guys in Queensland who had a big distribution business, the Barty family. So there's a lot of people know Chad Barty.
Chad Barty, yeah.
Yep. So his family had a distribution business run from there, Q-Day Distribution. And I got told of that, and I was like, Mick told me about that, and I was like, oh wow. So I just got it in my head. I'm like, man, I reckon if I go up to Queensland and skate, I'll go to Pizzey Park.
Yep.
Because that's where it was. Yeah, because that's where it was. Yeah. And I took I think I had $30, and that's all I had, and I just lived off 2-minute Maggie noodles, and got the cheapest hotel I could find. And I just was that, I guess, aware of where I was at with skating. I'm like, you know what? I'm sure if I go rock up to this park and skate, I'll get noticed, and I'm sure something's going to happen. And yeah, I went there and skated. Skated the whole day at Pizzey, and then the next day, I guess word got around that from that day that I was skating. And the next day, it was really cool. Jamie Barty, Chad Barty, Andrew Curry, I think Dion Kovac was there, Al Boglier, all those boys, Seb Steele as well. I think they all rocked up because they'd heard that some of them, I think one or maybe all, I don't know, had heard that there's this kid from Sydney that's skating. Let's go check him out or whatever. And Jamie had heard about it, and Jamie was more the leader in the sense of like Q-Day, not so much of the crew, but and they saw me skate and they were hanging and stuff, and they all sort of, I still remember they all sort of like come around me and like
check you out,
just
size you up a little bit.
Yeah, and Jamie was like, dude, love your skating and this and that. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks, man. And then he goes, oh, I run this distribution thing and I'd love to like help you out. I was like, yes, there it is. I was so stoked.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, then they hooked that up. So it was a good sponsor. They hooked up so much back in the day. That was like in one hit from having nothing to then getting Etnies. So they put me on Etnies, A1 Meets Wheels, Tracker Trucks, and Neighborhood Skateboards.
Wow.
Yeah, which was run out of Neighborhood from LA. Yeah, so I was like, that's epic. I was so pumped, man. Yeah.
Well, when you're in those, when you're skateboarding, I remember back in the day, like even just a pair of shoes was the biggest thing because your shoes are smashed, your board's thrashed, a couple of t-shirts, even that alone just lifts your spirits and gives you all the confidence that you need to do, to go out and skate better and things like that. So that's a big moment, man.
Yeah, it really does. It's a really, really impressionable thing, and yeah, man, it's super impressionable, and to be brought in that way was really cool, because then I ended up finding out who all these guys were, like the guys I mentioned before, that came to see me at skate that day, like I was like, I didn't know who those guys were because I didn't know about like mags and who's current and who's this, and I wasn't in the scene. I was just like, I just was this neighborhood kid that would just skate and just go and just be around that circle of people. And the people I looked up to in skateboarding weren't so much. I was looking at magazines like Skate and Life, and the people I was looking at there were a lot of the vert skaters from back in the day that I thought were just amazing. Like there was Glenn Robinson or Danny Van or Scott Payne, and so there was a lot of these guys that Borgie, all these older '80s vert dudes that I was just thinking these guys are amazing to me. That hyped me up, even though I was more onto like transitions and smaller bowls and street. I was impressed by these local cats, and there was a bit of a scene around Hurstville back in the day. There was a really good skate shop back in the day called Skateboard World, and that was in Hurstville as well. That was in Hurstville, yeah. So I'd look at those guys and be like, dude, you guys are where it's at. And yeah, so for me, knowing about who's in Queensland or who's holding it down in Queensland, I didn't know. But then to be accepted by those dudes in Queensland, now they're, we're lifelong friends to this day. We're still in touch, like with all the boys from back in that day. It was awesome to feel accepted, and at the same time do life with, and travel and do all that sort of stuff with those same dudes. For sure. I met that day. Yeah, that's cool.
That's eye-opening stuff. Meeting guys. I remember being probably, I was probably when I was skating at Cannonball and Cook and Phillip and Martin Place, I would have been 13 or 14. And same sort of thing. I was looking up to you and to guys like Michael Davidson, Aaron Jenkins, Tyzo Hughes, and just like demigods, you know what I mean? Just like, this is incredible. These guys are just, this is what they're doing. That's exactly what I want to do. But yeah, you're just in awe of the people that come before you when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, it's true, man. I love that about growing up. It's wonderful, that we gravitate towards people that we are very much, we have a lot in common. But as a kid, sometimes you don't know where you're destined to go. But lo and behold, it's almost just playing itself out because you're already showing that you're impressed by certain elders, And
for sure, man. And there was something special about, as I said, I was only 13 back then, and you would remember a lot more than me, obviously, but there was something special about that time in Sydney. I guess it would have been the early 2000s in the city, and just hordes of kids would rock up to Cannonball and float around the city. And it was just like electric. It was just the best feeling to just jump on a bus and land in the city. And you just felt like something was happening. It was just a really good scene. There was a lot of positive people, and I was just so excited to be a part of that. I reckon it was and seeing you skate around and people would be ollieing the wall and doing tricks that you'd never thought you could do. There was something going on in that time. I thought, the Olympics had just been as well, sort of a couple of years prior. So the city was sort of a little bit hot in that sense.
But
I do remember, I'll tell you a quick story, but I don't know if you remember this. I hit you up on Facebook a couple of years after, maybe 5 years after. But when we were skating Cannonball, the cops used to screech in and chase everyone away and whatnot. It was there was a period of time where it was like, sort of the skaters there were getting treated like criminals. Like, it was crazy. Everyone would scatter and boards would be flying everywhere and whatnot. So it was around that time. But I remember there was a couple of people hanging out at Cannonball that will remain nameless, but one of them pinched my board and took off with it, which whatever happens, Sydney City. And I remember just being absolutely devastated, like in tears, because that was just my whole life, you know what I mean? I waited the whole week to get to Cannonball to skate. And anyways, and I don't know how it came about, but you came over and you gave me your board and you just said, here you go, man, take this. And you gave me a full setup, and the devastation turned to just, excitement, and everything was just fixed, man. So a big thank you to you, from a 13-year-old Jack for that. But it was a big moment. Like, I was
All
just,
right, that's
you know,
cool.
at that impressionable age, man, like your whole life
Mm,
is skateboarding, and it was
yeah,
a pretty
man.
bad day, but you turned it into a good day, man. So thank you.
Oh, dude, stoked, man.
Yeah,
I'm thankful that I could play a part in that. That's rad, dude.
yeah. I
That,
think it was a
yeah.
I was trying to remember the board earlier today. I think it was a Mark Appleyard board,
Right, right, right,
possibly. Yeah, I can't really remember. Had some spray
right.
paint
Okay.
on it and everything, and it was a bit used. It was perfect, man. It was a great moment. But
Oh man, that's really cool.
yeah, man. And so where did your skateboarding take you? I know, like, what was it like
hmm
being
hmm
sort of, you know, in those early days in Sydney, and
Um,
skateboarding every day, and sort of getting a bit of notoriety? Where did that lead you?
that like from getting hooked up, um, I started seeing like from the first days of Q Day. What was really cool there is I started meeting all these other skateboarders that had already done things and been places, and and that was sponsored by these other brands, and they were so much more, I guess, established, and but now I was in direct contact with them, and the communication was different. Suddenly they're talking like, oh yeah, so when I was in the States here, or I'm like, oh wow, really? Like that wasn't part of my convo before. So that started opening up my horizon to sort of go, okay, I want to go do something with this as well. Like what's the next thing I could go out and do? So the first I guess trip, I actually, hold on, I did a trip before I got sponsored. Actually, I did a trip to now that I'm thinking about it, now when I was 19, I did a trip to South America, and I went to San Francisco as well. And I went to EMB. I went to EMB and I skated at EMB, and and I met people like Eric Bupecki. I remember buying wheels off Scott Johnson. I remember teaching a little kid that I'm pretty sure was LeVar McBride. He saw me do a type of pressure flip, and this is just when pressure flips were starting to go out, and they started becoming. It was like a fad that came in, and then it just died out. But as they were sort of dying out, it was something that I could play around with a fair bit. And I did this one pressure flip, and this little kid just comes up and he's like, "Yo, man, that was dope. Teach me how to do that trick." And I was like, "This little girl was so tiny," and yeah, it was little LeVar McBride, and so I did this one style of pressure flip, and he's like, "Oh, no way!" And he asked me how to do it, and I told him, and he did it like maybe second shot or something, and I'm like,
Wow.
"Whoa!" I tripped because I'm like, and I didn't know. Like, obviously, he's one of the greatest street skateboarders ever,
Yeah.
but when you see him as a kid, you can see, wow, okay, I can see why he ended up being who he was,
Yeah, for sure,
like
man.
to learn some of that. And I remember seeing things like Drake Jones rocking up, and
Hmm.
all these really cool skateboarders from EMB as it was sort of like starting to really blow up. But that was one trip I went to, and that was quite impressionable to me. But yeah, in saying that, I just remembered this now. Actually, before Q Day happened, it was sort of rewinding a little bit. From that trip at 19, I also went to San Diego, and I had some friends. There was one guy that I knew, Snake, Brendan, and we didn't know each other all too well, but they're like, "Hey, we'll meet you in San Diego," because I was in Ecuador with my family. And I just said, I'm just going to venture out to San Diego. Anyway, I did go out there, and I don't know if you remember a company by the name of Hate Street. Hate Street's an old company from back in the day, very well-known company, run by Tony Magnuson. Eric Costin used to skate for him as well. So there's Eric Costin, Matt Hensley, a whole bunch of great names, Dan Paterko. Anyway, I hooked up with these guys from Australia, mates of mine, and they said that I could stay at the Hate Street house. And that was like a big deal because people in Australia had even heard about the Hate Street house. It was like, San Diego was like the mecca of skateboarding back in the day. And Hate Street was the biggest brand back in the day as well in skateboarding. It was massive. And the fact that they were telling me that I could go stay at the house, I was like, whoa, this is gnarly. Like I thought like, wow, okay. So I had a place to stay, and they said I could have a room there because they'd get a lot of people in there. And I got to stay there with Ben Pappas and Tuss Pappas and Danny Meyer, and I remember staying in Chris Livingston's room, and who else was in that room? Costin was in that room for a couple of nights as well. Who else was in that room? It was just this big room. It was like this whole skate house, you know.
Yeah,
so anyway, like
I can imagine.
And once again, I was in this position where I'm probably older than a lot of these guys, but I'm there feeling like that little kid from just, you know, from Sydney City, Rockdale, and this and that, just going, oh, okay, just keeping silent, just observing and watching, going, wow, this is awesome. You know?
Yeah, just taking it all
funnily enough, actually older than some of these guys, you know,
yeah.
feeling like a grommy.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, so I had that experience, and a lot of cool things happened from that, you know, answering your question. It's like, all that world was open to me, and they were making a movie at the time called Next Generation. Epic movie. If you get to watch it, watch it. It's phenomenal. Some of the best like parts in skateboarding, like especially one guy, Dan Paterka. He was known to be like the best on that team. He sort of came and went, but if you look at him, he skates a smoke on the water, like phenomenal skateboarding. But anyway, all that was happening. Ocean Howe was staying at the place as well, and I remember going to the editing suite and just sitting there going, man, I'm here with like Ocean Howe, and there's like Alfonso Rolls, there's like Eric Costin, they're editing their video, or Tony Magnuson's here, and I'm just in the back because it's late at night, and because I'm staying there, I'm sort of just eating away, just hanging, you know, and they're editing this movie that's about to come out, which is a massive film.
That's crazy, man.
So that was so impressionable to me, just to be within that environment and then be like, wow, okay. And then hanging with and my best mate on that trip was Ben Pappas. He was so much younger than me. He was this little kid. He was just this awesome, sweet, cute little kid that was just a prodigy in vert skating. And Tuss, his older brother, who's like kind of my age now, but he seemed so much more impressionable and older than me. Because he was just so like confident and just, you know, gun ho.
That's a big name.
Yeah, so they had just gotten on that brand as well. So they were the big thing in vert skating as well. So we got to hang out there for a bit. So that world opened up to me. But then after that closed, that's when I've just gone back to Sydney, and then it's just me again, you know. And then from there it was like, you know, sponsorless or whatever. Not that I wanted to be, I just didn't think it could happen, so to speak, you know. But then that's going back now to then that's when Queensland unfolded and Q Day and that. So all these things started happening in answering your question, where worlds started opening up, where combos started opening up, and opportunities and travel and you know, to put a long story short, I've done a lot of different things when it comes to like skateboarding and notoriety, like you asked before, like being able to do so many things. Like, you know, I was in so many different magazines, and magazines were the big deal back in the day.
For sure, man.
You know, TV commercials and documentaries, and really cool sort of thing. Like with some of the film work that I've done, like outside of the actual video parts that I've had, the really cool thing is like the first I had this thing on SBS. It was like a day in the life of Sid Tapia, and it was this young director come up, and he's contacted me on the phone. He somehow got in touch with me, and he's like, "Oh, g'day, my name's Warwick Thornton. Was just wanted to look. I'm working for SBS. Just wanted to do a day in the life thing." Blah blah. I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah, let's hang. You know, I'll have the camera on you for 24 hours, and we'll just go ahead and shoot." I'm like, "Yeah, sweet, let's do it." But then to hear later on down the track that Warwick Thornton has won like an Academy Award for one of his films, Samson Delilah, which is like, I think it was a silent indigenous film.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
well,
he directed that.
I actually watched that little piece that he did, the 24 hours today. Yeah. So he went on to become an Academy Award winner, because he was quite timid behind the camera, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. You see him there, he's like just, you know, just hanging, you know, and just filming. But yeah, he's doing his thing, and I've run into him a few times there, and he's done some great work with other, you know, in some other great films and some other great actors. And then I did a short film one time with another guy who got in touch with me. His name's Drew Bailey. and he did his first film on me, which is a little short film, and he got me to act and all this stuff. And funnily enough, he's got me to act as an artist who skates. And I wasn't painting back in the day. And the movie's called Blank Canvas, and it has me sort of wondering what I'm going to do on this blank canvas. And I just get distracted. I'm like, I just go out for a skate. I just daydream about skating. And he made it all happen. It was in the Fringe Festival back in the day. And now he's gone on to work on some major blockbuster films, like mega Hollywood films.
Yeah, right.
And
interesting.
Which is really cool to be in touch with people like that and see them go on to do their thing. And it's just really, really, really precious that way. And but yeah, man, it's a lot of cool stuff has happened out of being able to just stick to what you love doing and just go hard at it and just have opportunities come that way and try bring your best to the table.
At what point during that period did you get back into art?
So I dabbled with a little bit here and there with some of my board graphics. So after Q Day, I got asked from Andrew Curry if I'd want to skate for his brand, and he said he wanted to turn me pro, give me my own board. And that was so massive for me, like, as in, Andrew has been one of my favorite skateboarders since, I started seeing him evolved into who he is in my world. Anyways, seeing his skateboarding, I'm like, this guy is phenomenal.
100%,
and then from there, when he asked me long ago to be on the team, I was like, wow, it was a big move for me because I was with Q Day and they hooked me up with everything. But if I was going to go with him, it would just mean a board sponsor, and that would be it. I'd be cutting off ties with Q Day, and then I'd only be riding for his startup brand. But he was going to give me a pro model with Adrian Powell and Marty Baptist as an amateur, and Andrew Curry is pro as well. And I was like, it was so exciting. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll do it. And then he said, you can even design your own graphics. And I was like, oh, wow, really? So I was like, okay, cool. And I used to just fiddle around and dabble here and there because of my old graph days and stuff. I'd always have black books around the house, and I'd always keep sketching, and I'd always keep tagging in black books and stuff. And so I'd always know how to draw and that sort of thing. So that got me into sort of going, okay, I'm now putting my artwork on something that's going to be, sold. And that sparked a little bit here and there, but I still didn't dabble in it that much. When I started writing for Time Skateboards, they asked me to do some graphics as well, which I did. I think I did most of my graphics on that, on Time as well. And then,
that's pretty cool.
but it was never something that I would just sit there and want to do because I didn't want to skate. No, I just wanted to skate. But so the art definitely kicked in when I was kicked in a lot more when my first daughter was born. And that was 9 years ago. When Skylar was born, I really we had a whole lot of legal walls in the area. And when I was living in Camperdown, there's a bunch of legal walls, and my wife and I, we used to love going to Melbourne, and I'd always be fanning out on all the works that I'd see on the streets, and just still be so in love with the art of graffiti. But because it was always that weird, relationship that we had because of the accident and everything, it was just one of those things I could appreciate. But I'd be taking photos of it. I started up a bit of a little clothing label, and I'd always sometimes apply my graphics onto that. And then, but my wife really encouraged me to just get out there and start painting and be like, go buy some spray paint, go. I was like, all right, cool. And that once I started painting some of those legal walls, I was like, wow, I started realizing again, like, this is why I fell in love with it. It was like the smell of the paint, the rattle of the can, just the mark making, and just being able to see something larger than life. I'm like, that's what it was always about, but here I am, now able to just do it with some freedom and time and just see what happens,
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah.
100%.
Mm.
It sounds like you kind of re-fell in love with the whole idea of creating art. But 9 years, man, you've come a long way in 9 years in terms of, you look like you've been doing it nonstop since you were at 5 years
Yeah.
old. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think it was from those foundational years, man, of learning how to draw and knowing that I had a talent to be able to put pen to paper and make things happen.
Yeah, it makes a
And
difference
then
doing things at a young age. I think if you learn things at a young age, even if you do take a
yeah,
break, it seems like
yeah,
that sort of riding a bike type of scenario where there's some muscle memory there, and you can
fu-
draw on those earlier experiences, and you pick things up a little bit quicker.
fully, because you pick up on it, you have a liking for it, and even though you may be doing other things, like I was skating, I'd still be attracted to art. Like I'd still be looking at art books, or like when I say art books, for me it was more like maybe books on lettering, or book, you know, or graph magazines and stuff. You know, some of the old hype magazines, I used to like just looking through them and just going, wow, this is awesome, wow, this is great. But just skating, just going hard at my skating, but still just appreciating it for what it is. And then thinking, wow, wouldn't it be, because as a kid, you'd always be like, oh, imagine I could do a burner like that or a piece like this. You'd sort of, and the only way for me as a kid that I could do it was to go out and rack the paint. And then in the hope, and whatever we got, it's like, okay, we just got to make the most of what we got now and do something that way. So it was so unstructured. Whereas now when you're older and you're like, oh, okay, actually I can go out, I'll go buy that paint. I'll lay it out just like we always used to do with the black books. You do your outline, you see what colors you're going to do. Everything you kind of learned from books like Subway Art or from Star Wars, the doco, you'd see how they did it. And you're like, okay, I can actually do that now, and just sit back and really give it a crack,
Yeah,
and
man.
that's what was cool to do when I started up again, to just go through that sort of process again. Yeah.
So I want to talk to you specifically about what kind of materials you're using lately, and you said obviously you've been getting into some oils, which is interesting to me. But I do want to talk to you, and I don't want to keep you too long because I know you've got things to do as well. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your faith and where that sort of intersects with your art, and how that sort of shapes your life and your painting, and where that sort of came from. Was it from your childhood, or was it introduced to you later in life?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It came to me like in the, you're growing up. Every human being hears about God, and you hear about God, you hear about other gods, you hear about religions, Jesus, cults, Satan, devil, this all this stuff. But to me, it never interested me. If it did, if I was introduced to it in any way through my upbringing, it was just through probably being at some Catholic churches, and because I went to like a Catholic school as a young kid. But to me, if it was definitely the most boring place that I could ever imagine going to. Like it literally was. My mum would be there having to say, got to go to church or something. I'm like, to me, just I remember at 9 years old specifically, just finding it so detestable and just having to just say, I never want to go there because it is the most boring freaking place I could ever possibly imagine. And so it was something that, what I'm getting at there is that it was definitely something that I was never attracted to, regarding like going to church or something, or wanting to sit there and listen to some dude like half sing and half talk and in this weird voice, about, it's like you're singing hymns or something. I was like, I don't know, it was just weird. I still find Catholicism very strange to this day. It's a very strange it's a very strange way of being able to be taught about the love of God. But for me, so that was nothing. For me, it was definitely all about skateboarding and my friends, and being out in the streets a lot, running amok and wanting to do what guys do. And man, for me, it was definitely wanting to know about exploring drugs, exploring girls, exploring all those things that I thought were just exciting, which I did. And I went hard out and all that sort of stuff throughout, my teens, and then through my 20s as well. I was introduced to like drinking and getting drunk and smoking even. I remember, the first time I was drunk, I think I was about three years
Wow,
old. Yeah,
really?
like, yeah. Family setting, and
Oh, God.
I came across some drink and at a party, and I drank it, and then I think it was a bit of an amusement thing amongst the elders, seeing a little kid drinking, and just I got drunk by it. But I hear the story that they're, oh yeah, I remember you got drunk at this age. It was hilarious, blah blah blah. But I look back at it and I'm like, that's not good, you know?
No.
But for me, it was like, you see all the elders drinking. It's like they're having a party. Because South Americans, you know, we love partying, and
part of the culture.
It was a very given thing. Me growing up on weekends, it was like, you go to this house, the music comes on, everyone starts doing the salsas, this and that, and there's drinks, everyone's drinking, and the kids are out running amok. We'd be out, you know. I still remember to this day growing up, it was like, okay, so you'd see one of the older guys come out, he's smoking, throws his cigarette out. We're like 5 years old. We were like, okay, run, go to grab the cigarette. What's it like? You know, we're just trying to smoke it or whatever, and drinking, hiding, going into the kitchen at like 7 years old, 6 years old, running into the kitchen to see, like, go to the cask, see what it tastes like. Oh, it tastes good. You start getting a bit wired, you know. It was a given thing, and you know, but so it wasn't. I say all that to tell you that I wasn't brought up to be a Christian, so to speak.
Right? Yeah.
That could kind of tell you. That could kind of tell you how, in some ways, that rings true. But so yeah, like, but how it came about? I was at the age of about I started through skateboarding culture. Like, I would be reading, you know, magazines and just reading Transworld or something, and at the end of a Lance Mountain interview, or at the end of a Richard Mulder interview, or at the end of a Salman Agar interview, they're talking about saying thank you to Jesus or something. I was like, oh, okay, interesting, whatever. Like, that was probably just dropped in there every now and then. I found that sort of impressionable. Like, oh wow, they're kind of, I guess they are different from the usual, like, gun ho hardcore punk, you know, rebellious sort of skater, which I found very attractive, and I pretty much was identifying myself with that way. But then there was these certain dudes that would be, you know, I guess more on the, you know, good side, so to speak. So that, I think that probably would have had an impression on me in some way, because it definitely caused me to look twice and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then other dudes started coming out, and I remember when Lenny Kirk came out, and he was really extreme about it all. But before all that, when I was telling you about when Andrew Curry got me onto on Grace skateboards, you know, the company was called Grace, and the logo was a dove. And Andrew had, you know, was telling people that, you know, he'd come out saying, you know, he was born again Christian, and, you know, he was hanging out with Salman Agar. I think they were hanging out at like some skate camp or something in the States or something like that, and they got on real well. And you know that, you know, he was able to, you know, get some stuff off him, and he sort of was identifying with Christianity as well, and he was going on that journey. And I was like, wow, that's pretty unique, you know. Like, so when he asked me to be on the company, to me it was like, that's Andrew Curry, I'm down. You know, it wasn't like, oh, he's a Christian. I didn't know. Didn't bother me that. So I was like, yeah, it's Andrew Curry, dude. He's asked me to skate for his brand. Sweet. But what caused me to see things is like that caused Andrew and I to start hanging out a lot more. And I would see that Andrew's a really sweet natured, just gentle, gifted guy. So he's got so much heart. It's amazing. And I would see that on his life, and I'd be like, oh, that's really cool. And, you know, he'd never be like talking to me about it or trying to, like, you know, convert me to Christianity or anything. Nothing, not at all. But what it did do, it would soften my heart to sort of go, okay, like, if someone were to tell me about Jesus or about the Bible or whatever, I'd be like, I'm not going to be like, no. I'll be like, oh, I've seen Andrew's life. He's cool. I want to see what it's about. Anyway, in the city one day, I got given a Bible from a dude that was just handing out Bibles. He was a little Anzac dude, old guy. He was chained. He had his old chap, like in his 70s. I think he was at the time 70s or 60s, and he had chains, but he had an Anzac. He was a war vet.
A veteran.
Yeah, and he had his chain. He had chains down onto the ground onto a little box he was sitting on, but he's handing out Good News Australia Bibles.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, who's this cat? You know, he's like all dressed up, but chains around him. And he's like, he's doing something. And I was like, he gave me a Bible. All right, cool. I put it in my backpack, and I'd open up and read it. You know, I'd open up and read it every now and then, and then, and as I was reading it more and more, I was like on my own sort of journey of just wanting to be the man, you know, like as we do as we grow up, we just want to be number one or whatever, you know, we all go through that sort of ego trip. And then, so to me, it was like, okay, I'm going to read this thing and see what I can get out of it. But in reading that and reading the words bit by bit, I was starting to realize, man, this is like, it's quite phenomenal what's being said here by this Jesus character. But funnily enough, because I was on that trip of just wanting to be the best, this is pretty interesting. I don't think I may have shared it on Ryan's podcast, but for me, it was just about wanting to be number one and wanting to be the best and get all the notoriety and this and that. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to be smart about it. I'm going to see who the most famous person in the world is, and I'll learn off this person. And then I said to myself, well, but I'm going to make sure that this famous person teaches about the best thing ever in life. And what is the best thing ever? So I'll be thinking, oh, what's the best thing ever? Like, what's the most powerful thing ever? Is it money? Well, not really, because, you know, if people, you know, if you've got money, you can't always just get love out of it or whatever. Is it power? Then the reason some people want power is because they just want they want to be loved, you know. And then I was like, you know what? It's actually love. Love's the most powerful thing. I was like, yeah, nah. I kind of agreed in my own understanding. Like, love's the most powerful thing. And then I thought, well, who's the most famous? I thought about all these famous people, and then I was like, actually, I think this Jesus character is probably the most famous dude in the world. And then I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to learn off this dude because that will probably help me be number one.
Wow. Yeah.
That's my way of thinking. I was just like, yeah, that's a smart move.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so when I started reading about him, I'm like, oh, hold on, this guy is like the most famous dude in the world, but he's also talking about this thing that I figured out is the most powerful thing, which is love. You know, I'm thinking it's all that I've figured all this out.
Yeah.
So then as I was reading that, I'm like, I even said to myself, I still remember saying to myself, I'm going to become this guy's student. Like I'm going to become this guy's disciple because I want to learn from this dude. But I'm thinking of it in a very selfish advantage. And the more I read about what he was saying, I pulled away at one point. And the reason I pulled away is because Jesus says these words that strike your ego and your self-ambition to the core, which is when he says, if you want to be my disciple, so I'm there going, yeah, that's me. He goes, if you want to be my disciple, he goes, you got to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. And that means, and I'm thinking, deny yourself. I'm like, I'm not going to, I'm here
to. It doesn't fit in with what you're trying to do there.
I'm here to pump myself up, you know, I'm all about me, you know, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, nah, this Jesus character is not where it's at. He's saying I've got to abandon everything if I want to be his disciple. So I was like, nah. So I sort of, but something kept drawing me back because the things that were actually being said, I couldn't deny that, you know, what's being said from those words are just too true and good, you know, and that it's not just words of a man, but, you know, God in the flesh come to, you know, point out all the errors that we have as human beings and before the standard of perfection, before the standard of God's perfect law, humanity falls guilty, and the penalty for that guilt is damnation, not because God's this evil God, but it's just that if you do something wrong by someone, completely wrong, and you want to reject someone, then how on earth can that someone accept you into their family? It just doesn't work. You can't just say, well, I'm just going to heaven because, you know, I'm just going to go into someone's house because I'm going to claim it as my house. It's like, no, you know what? No, you are not the Lord of this house. You are not the Lord of heaven. Like, you don't just make your way in. You got to somehow be absolved in a way. So, you know, like I started to understand and comprehend that by, you know, that sense of faith and understanding of, because to me, it was always an understanding that life's just not life, man. It's like there's something else that goes on, because to me, I understood that eternity is something that's so freaking obvious in this world. you know, it's so obvious. It stares us in the face, eternity. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you look at a skateboard, like, where did that come from? It came from you know, some wood manufacturing plant. But where'd that come from? That came from a tree. But where'd that tree come from? That came from somewhere else. And if I was to burn all that up, if I was to burn this skateboard up, where does that go to? It goes off into, you know, it turns into smoke or whatever. It goes off into the atmosphere. It turns into something else. And then I started, you know, and this is just my logic, my sort of own reasoning. I'd even start looking at little things, you know, like this paintbrush. You know, people say that's the end of the paintbrush. I'd be like, well, no, it's not. It just goes back here and it goes round to the other side and then it comes around full circle. And then you look at everything's full circle, but in a different shape. I'll be like, dude, eternity is actually everywhere. And it used to just make me think, far out, it's kind of trippy. And then, and people already know within themselves, like there's something out there, or, you know, or life goes on. People, because it's written in our hearts, and it's everywhere we look, you know, creation speaks of it all. So anyway, that's all that sort of stuff in short, sort of maybe kind of realize that this Jesus dude who's claiming to be, you know, like the Son of God, God in the flesh, like this unknown God has come to earth in the shape of a man, and is now being able to talk and testify of that God character. And then that led me on a big trip to this day I'm still like so enamored and, you know, devoted, not because I have to, but because I'm devoted, because I realize how much love there is from this creator God who sent Christ to the earth to live and die for us and show us an example of who he is. But I must say, for many years, I did have to go through a very, very long road of sussing out whether this Jesus guy was real or not, because I didn't believe, even though something in my heart was like, yeah, I do identify with this. I was like, but hold on, man, did this guy even exist? I'm going to go out and seek. So I started doing a lot of research regarding a lot of literature and books that I was reading through, you know, from people like Lee Strobel, or other books like More Than a Carpenter. There's all these real famous books on apologetics, on basically proving whether Jesus even existed, whether he lived, died, rose again. Where's all this evidence? Like, I had to go into that, because that's how I was like, I'm not just gonna freaking. I want to go that way, but I can't. You know, I got to know that I know. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you're inquisitive by nature, so it only makes sense that you would look into it.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff I looked into, and funnily enough, you know, I ended up coming to know the truth. And funnily enough, that's what Jesus says. He says, you know, seek and you shall find, etc. But, you know, I did have to go into that, and found some great literature from people that, funnily enough, were atheists, or people that didn't believe, but whether they were experts in journalism or experts in other areas, that had to go diving deep in, and found all this, you know, undeniable evidence and fact, and all this sort of stuff just caused me to sort of, I guess, just, you know, realize, yeah, man, like, that's it. That's where I'm at. And yeah, I'm like, I need to be saved. I need to be like, I need to be, as many people know, I need to be born again. I need that, God. I'm dead in my sin, man. I need that. And if you give me that as a free gift, then it's undeserved. I definitely don't deserve it. But if you've come to give me that, then thank you, you know. And since that, man, it's been you know, and going back to the question is like, how that's played out in my life has been, you know, something where I've lived. It's definitely, at first it caused me to be really vulnerable again, because it was something I couldn't deny. And I remember coming out in an interview in ASM and telling people about Jesus and this and that. And I remember copping so much slack for it. And, you know, and I was just on my own, just doing it by myself. I didn't go to church or anything. I didn't know much about church and all this sort of stuff, because, put it this way, man, like when I did all that, I was just out skating the streets all the time. I didn't even know what a Christian church looked like, you know, so to speak. You know, I didn't know what church was like. I didn't have a clue, man. No one. It was from reading a Bible, from looking at, my world was skateboarding, so it was within that skate culture that I was learning about Christianity, and then just reading the Bible. So the first time I went to church, was when I was 28. And that was because a friend of mine introduced me to this girl who he said goes to church. And I meet this girl and I'm like, whoa, this girl's really attractive. I'm like, and she goes to church? Remember, when I was 9 years old, my experience of a Catholic church was just, dude, old people that were just sitting there looking bored out of their brains. And then he's telling me this really young, attractive girl who manages like General Pants, which was a really big thing back in the 90s. Like, he's saying she's a manager at the city store, this and that. I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, this is crazy. Yeah, she took me to church for the first time. This is a girl that I ended up being engaged with as well. It's just I'm not, I didn't end up marrying her. I'm married to my wife, animated today. But it was just, it really opened my eyes, man. I was like, what on earth? She took me to church to her church for the first time. And it was all young people that were just so psyched about living life and wanting to do good by their community and by others, and wanting to just shine a great example of living, and still going through their ups and downs of being young, which we all do, but just having to just sort of say, well, look, and that's what I was going through. I'm there going, look, I got my issues, I got my problems, but I really don't want to just revel in that. I do want to keep striving for being a better human being. And that example for me in my life and for Christians is Christ, who's the perfect man. And I was like, well, so that's what I was just that way inclined. So that opened my world up there. And I took a hiatus from being in the skate scene in a while, because I realized that where my life was at. And I'm like, dude, I've got to really know about this stuff. So I kept skating hard. I was doing a lot of things within church, getting, I was still in all the magazines and that sort of thing. But, now it's Sid the Christian, So it was, so that shaped me around a lot. I had copped a lot of slack from people and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, man, which sucks, but I get it. Like, I understand. Like, it's, they probably think, Sid's, like, lost the plot or whatever. All types of stuff was being said about me, and it was, but my faith and my identity wasn't in that anymore. And not that I knew that, because it still hurt, but there was something, I just knew there was a greater strength in where I believe my hope was lying, So man, it was like 5 years of that. And then I started coming back in the city more. And then that started shaping my way of skateboarding, looking at skateboarding differently, my artwork. When I'd go do my artwork, it's like, I want to be able to really give it as a gift to people and bring honor to people, and do my best to be able to bring honor to people and areas that are very important for people, that mean a lot for people. I want to be able to bring art and do wonderful things with it that way, and in turn hopefully want to lead people towards a greater sense of hope, or just to encourage people, to lift people up with with what I've got. Yeah,
it shines through in your work, man. You can tell that all of your art is you can tell it's really well thought out, and there's good messages behind it. And
cool, man. That means a lot.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that on the painting section on your website, that very first one, I think it's you'll have to remind me, once the bell opens, or once the
the opening of the gates.
That is a standout piece, man. It's amazing, and it
Thanks,
looks when did you do that? Was that recently?
Yeah, that was fairly recently. That was I finished that one about 2 months ago. And yeah, that was I used my wife as a model for that one, and that was based around wisdom, that cries at wisdom. And like in the Bible, it says that Lady Wisdom, wisdom's referred to as a female, and she stands at the opening of the gates, like basically crying out to the people, like she's crying out to people to sort of get wisdom, like, because people can be so lost or so foolish or just go on their own understanding, and there's Lady Wisdom like crying out to people to come in and like take her advice. So that painting is about, if you notice, like in the painting, the background is like that sense of light, so wisdom coming from an area of light. And then what's in front of her, you see her face is kind of more on the dark side, because what she's facing is this dark world. And what she's wanting to bring is wisdom And so she's just about to, you see her eyes closed. And I did a series of paintings with, where there's bandages over like danger tape, like the red and white danger tape.
Yeah. The one behind
so
you there. Yeah. That's of yourself, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I just use myself as a subject there, but that's got a whole lot of meaning to it as well. Everything's significant. The tattoos, it all has meaning to it. But the danger tape, I'm doing one at the moment. I'm working on one that's right next to me right now, with another one with the danger tape, but that's another subject. And I'm looking forward to getting on that. But what I'm getting at there is that the danger tape, what that represents is like when you're looking into the light, it's sort of like it's dangerous in so many ways, and it's almost like saying you're so unworthy of looking at perfection. So, and it's quite dangerous. So there's a covering of the tape, of that danger tape on the eyes. But lady, if you notice with that Lady Wisdom one, she doesn't have that. She's only got a little bit of it showing on the back of her.
Interesting.
On the back of her, where she's unveiled because she's coming from that position of light. So there's no danger with her.
Right.
And she's about to ring that bell. And if you see the tats on her, there's significance for the tats as well, because it says my counsel, like her counsel, and then it's got the compass navigation of north, south, east, and west, saying like her counsel reaches all corners of the earth. And yeah, there's a few other things that if I could remember well, but yeah, then there's the garment that she's wearing. It's sort of a bit of that sort of old school sort of like Hebrew reference of the garb and what they used to wear, but coming from the Ancient of Days and coming into the world, about to ring that bell and to make a massive announcement to the world. So that's what that painting was about.
Yeah, beautiful, man. One of the things I was really interested to find out from you was how much of your faith sort of came through in your art, and by the sounds of it, it's quite a bit. You put a lot of thought into your subject matter and the symbols in your artwork and things like that. You have painted
definitely.
You've done a lot of NRL players too. A few from what I can tell. Is there interest in that, or is that like an ongoing relationship with a client, or?
Yeah, that started a friend of mine, Chet, who runs Workshop Australia. He had a wall out in Redfern, and it was like, hey Sid, I've been approached by NRL. They want to do a painting, etc. For the Rabbitohs, Greg Inglis, and I was like, he goes, would you be interested? And I was like, well, yeah, dude, that sounds right. I'd love to.
Cleveland Street?
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, no, that sounds great. Let's make it happen. So for me, it wasn't like, I don't come from football. My brother's a big Saints fan, and he was my father figure. He was definitely into like football hard, and he still is. But for me, it was I'm just skateboarding. And then, so when that job came, I was like, Greg Inglis. All right, Google Greg Inglis. Who's Greg Inglis? And it comes up. I was like, whoa, dude, this is a whole nother world. I'm like, this guy's awesome. He's like so well respected, and he's done some amazing things. He's loved by the game and this and that. I'm like, wow, what an honor. I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is cool, man. I'm going to be painting this hero. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So, so for me, it was more like, and it still is to this day, it's like I love being able to paint people because people are just amazing, And so that started that off. It did that, and then from that went really well, and then that led on to all the other NRL jobs. And the cool thing about that is I started, because I'm quite obsessive compulsive about the things I get into. It started opening my world up to outside of skateboarding. It started opening up my world up to NRL and the game, because you put up a mirror and then suddenly all these people are coming in and go, dude, this is awesome, blah, blah. Oh, dude, I hate the Rabbitohs, but dude, your painting's awesome. Come and do one in our neighborhood of this. I'm like, dude, this is so sick, So that opened up that avenue, and it got me to really appreciate that sense of tribalism around the fan base and the people that have just really like they've really just accepted me as part of, and they know that I'm just a skateboarder. I've got my history, and that I've been so ignorant to it all. I've said this on some Fox League stuff as well, but it's so rad that they're able to just go, no, dude, this is sick, and and from there, it's just led to a great relationship with the people within the game. Yeah,
man, real salt of the earth people, NRL fans, and people involved behind the scenes with commentary and everything like that. They're all
man.
Yeah,
it's really cool. It definitely humbled me as well, because for me, growing up in school, when you got your cliques, you got your skaters or your this and that. For me, when I was in high school, I was the graph kid, and then I was a skater kid. But the footy kids were always just way more like gnarly, just more the bullies. And I did get bullied, but I'd have to fight back at times. But then there was always this like,
man.
So it was to then see that, and I actually got fun. There's a real quick story. I had my jaw broken at the age of 14. I got mugged and hit by two big dudes. And they tried to take my board, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and they just belted me for no reason, and my jaw got snapped in two places. I got metal in my. I got like a metallic part of my jaw here.
Kidding.
And I was like 14 at the time, 14 or 15.
Yeah.
And they actually were reserve players for St. George back in the day.
Right.
One of them was, and I know that because my girlfriend at the time, we went to a game one night, and my girlfriend saw one of them sitting on the bench. Was it reserve grade? Then there's third grade. Was it third grade? Is that what it is in football? I think it was.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I know there's a couple of tiers, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was one of the tiers, and he was sitting in there with his team, and they got the jerseys on, like waiting for the game. And she just points this dude out, because I was like, "Hey, that's the guy that hit me," blah blah blah. And she just rolled up in front of all the dudes. Yeah, she just went to bat for me. I was like, "What are you doing?"
Damn.
And I'm like, "Just chill." And she was like pointing him out, like swearing at the dude, saying, "You did this." I'm like going, "Forget about it, dude. Chill out." And he was just there going, "Oh, what the hell?" And so it was just this funny thing where it was like, for me, like growing up as a kid, it was like, oh, footy players. I'd been picked on by some other dudes as well. I got choked by this other dude one time that went to school, and he was a really well-known footy player at school. And I remember him just choking me out one time because I was skating at a place and he was doing some construction work. And this is now when we're out of school. And he saw me, he's like, and I was making heaps of noise on the bench trying to learn a trick. And he's just yelled out saying, telling me to shut up and just cursing me and stuff. And I've gone over and I'm like, "Oh, hey, Luke, we went to school together." And he's just gone and grabbed me around the neck and just like held me down and choking me. And I'm like, "What the hell?" And his other mates sort of laughing about it, lets me go. So to me, growing up, it was like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. These footy players are nuts."
Yeah.
But
they definitely can be, for sure.
You grow up and you end up realizing people are people, man. It's like you get some idiots, you get some cool people, you get all sorts. I could be an idiot. I can be cool sometimes. We're people, man. And but it was cool to just see that about the game of football. Is like, that's their game. That's what they do. They got to be gnarly. But I really admire a lot of these people that have got some great self-control, man, because they get out there and they're just like, they got to go hard and put emotion out of the way,
100%.
But it's given me a greater respect for the game in many ways.
Yeah, it's good that you've come sort of full circle and you've seen it in a new light, I guess. No, that's true. And those that Greg Ingliswall again is that was incredible. Funnily enough, when I was getting prepared for the show today, I didn't realize how much of your work I recognized, but I didn't actually know that you painted it. Like, looking through your website and on Google, and you just like you've the diversity in your work's quite wide. And there was a lot of things I've seen that. I didn't realize Sid did that, and I didn't realize you did that across, lots of different mediums and a lot of big mural stuff. Which it was surprising to me because, obviously around the inner west and everything, there's a lot of work, and that one, the Greg Inglis one, and they're all really incredible, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Speaking
of painting specifically, so what you said before you're using 94s for your murals?
Yes, I use predominantly 94s, which is a matte low pressure paint. I love using those. I always have. I especially love them now because they've changed the valve system.
Okay.
So the valves a lot. They're a lot more pressure sensitive now, so they're not so hard. They're not going to cause so much damage.
Yeah, right.
If you're painting so if you're not painting so obsessively, like they've just got a real nice touch valve system to them now. They're beautiful paints, and not just that. The people are just so amazing. Like the owner, like Geordie,
so you've got a
the
relationship
owner.
with them?
Yeah, and just absolutely beautiful and hospitable and just so generous. And that starts from the leadership. And that's Geordie. If you meet Geordie, he's such a wonderful, enthusiastic, just energetic bloke that is just, he really just wants to do the best with what he has and serve his community and his culture that way, which is why you see, like, they lead the way when it comes to a paint brand, and
Yeah, massive.
and then his team under him are all about that as well. So I've got to meet a lot of those guys, and they've just they've really just welcomed me like family. When I went over to Spain and when I was in LA, they just were able to look after me super well, dude. Like extremely well. There's so many stories within that as well, where I was just like taken aback and, what, really, you guys are doing this for me? Far out. Like, yeah, and they're so generous. They're just really amazing people that way. So yeah, I use their paint predominantly. Or that's the only paint I use is their brand, but I predominantly use the 94 matte range, and every now and then the hardcore high pressure gloss range as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is the same brand, but yeah, gloss and matte. Yeah. And there is the water based as well, which I get into sometimes.
Okay. And with some of those bigger jobs, what's the process behind them? You get given a brief and they give you a space. How do you go about getting a photo and getting it up on the wall with correct proportions, shading and things like that?
Yeah. So with that,
do you freestyle that, or do you have a system?
I do have a few systems. Well, put it this way, I like to have for me, it's like I'd rather have everything in place because every wall is going to be different. So if I need to freestyle something, it's because there's no way of me being able to like grid up a type of thing because there's no space. Like if I'm in a laneway, for example, and it's a laneway and it's a big wall, then there's no way I could possibly, like step back and take a photo of the wall and grid something up. There's a few different methods that people use. Like there's like what some people call it a chicken scratch method or roning, where you just basically put marks on the wall, you take a photo of that, and then you superimpose the image that you're going to paint onto that wall, and you just drop the transparency down, and you can see both the wall and the image that you're going to do, and you just go up and follow the marks and make an outline and get your proportions right. That's extremely accurate and effective. You can also project things as well. That's the quickest way to probably do something, but you can't go too big a scale because unless you got yourself a super tech high quality projector, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just too pixelated. And then there's times where you do have to just freestyle stuff where you just. Then I learned that for me, I don't have a name for it. It was just, for me, it's just guesstimating. I start with one line, normally like a center line, and according to the proportion of the wall, it's just this first line that I'm about to do. I look at the wall and I start with the first line, and then that first line becomes the indicator for the next line that I'm going to do. And in proportion, I guesstimate, well, if I did this line yay long, then this next line has, in proportion to this first line, is going to have to be this long. And then the next line has to be this long. And then that lines up with this area. And then that takes a while, but I've had to use that method at times as well. And that's how I learned that just from drawing, because I learned to draw from life, where I would just see things and just copy it and do things accurately that way. I'm able to look at something and just draw it freehand and pretty much get the dimensions right. But that's because I'm totally just taking my time to just not cut corners and end up coming to be pretty much close to the real thing.
that photorealism stuff with a spray can always baffles me how it's done. I can't even begin to understand. Is for every, for the ACDC wall, for example, that you did, for every one of them, is there 150, from your past of attempts at drawing or painting someone with a spray can that doesn't turn out right, or is it just a method that works?
Yeah, there's some, yeah. Like there's one that I did out near Newcastle that I did, and I had to go freestyle on that one, and I wasn't happy with it for many reasons. That's when I just was starting off. The proportions were a little bit off. It wasn't that off, but it was a big one that I had to just wing, um, and that was one that I was like, oh, I could have done so much better in so many ways. But if I make a mistake, for me, I'm like, okay, I won't step out again until I really suss it out even further. Like I'll learn hard from mistakes like that. Like I remember doing that one, I was nearly in tears, even though it didn't look that bad. But I'm very sensitive and hard on myself at times, where if I don't get something right, I'm like, I could feel like a real miserable failure.
Yeah, man.
And that could come
sure.
from a whole lot of things, but yeah, man, it's like, so therefore it's like, if I'm going to step out again, I've got to really, I want to be able to give my best. And so yeah, that was just one. But when it comes to, the things that I've seen, you definitely have to start off with baby steps, of course. But when it came to learning the medium of spray painting, it was something that I was able to definitely practice a lot on those legal walls, and just explore with different things that I could do with letters and characters, and not just doing a 2D type character, but maybe putting some form into the character. And that would then lead on to knowing the fact that, oh yeah, okay, I've done this character, I've given him some form, but now let's go into like a person's face. And rather than making it a dope looking character, let's try and get to the real thing and see if that's achievable. And rather than using little tools to try and get a thinner line, which some people do, I'm like, no, let's see if I could just use a can to get this super skinny line, or cut it back to the point where it's like a fine line, or try and get a straight line, like a big straight line, just using my hands,
Yeah,
like a lot of the type work I've done, a lot of the type work I did on all the NRL murals, for example, that's all freehand. Like all the straight lines is all freehand stuff. And there was a time, and I still remember on one of my first walls that I did, I was like, how on earth do you do a straight line? I remember getting like a piece of cardboard and trying to just get the straight line and be like, but it was so hard to muck around with that. So I was like, no, there's got to be a way to do it. If you just put your mind to it and focus. I'd focus a lot of that, and then, you just end up giving it a crack and going hard at it, and then you end up achieving your results if you put your mind, if you really commit to it.
Yeah, man, for sure. So let's talk about your oil paintings that you've been working on lately. I was working with some I just had some oil paints that I found laying around. I've been doing a little bit of painting at home, and
awesome.
I don't understand. It's not drying for me. I'm smudging it with my hand as I'm going along. Like it's an amazing. I love the medium. It's you can get great colors and you can get real nice mixtures, and I love how it works like that. But I can't seem to work on anything because it just doesn't dry, and I'm smudging everything, and it's all mixing together. What kind of oils are you using firstly, and do you do something and then do you let it dry and get back to it, or?
Yeah, so like what I do, a lot of it is, the way I sort of look at it is how I've learned to spray paint and how I've learned to draw. I sort of now apply with my oil painting. So it's kind of like I'll do the outline first, and then fill in the main base colors, and then work off the base colors, and then start bringing in the form that way. But it's obviously just a way slower process because of the medium I'm using. So at first, when I started getting into it, I thought, I've got to get all these different mediums to sort of make the paint dry faster, or this and that. And long story short, now I only just use a bit of linseed oil, and that's it. Or I just go straight out of the tube. I only use,
Mixing it with linseed oil, do you mean? Mixing the paint with linseed oil?
yeah, using that as a medium. If I really need it to be a lot smoother and just have a bit more flow, I'll put a bit of linseed oil in. But now I'm finding I'm sort of hardly using any of that as well. I'm understanding the medium a bit more that way. But when I need linseed oil, so be it. I'll just use a bit just because I want a bit more flow on some areas. Because there's some I only use the primary colors. So I only use like red, yellow, blue, and white, and a burnt umber, which is basically the three primaries. When you mix that, you get a brown. So I just basically use that. So I've only got 5 colors on my palette, and then I make all the colors from that. I deliberately do that because I want to learn a lot about colors. It's also a bit of a upbringing thing as well for me, because coming from Ecuador with my family, the Ecuadorian, I was born here though, but the Ecuadorian flag, it's quite special to me in a kind of like a symbolic sort of way. Like Ecuador means equator. And as we know, Ecuador is known to be like the center band of the earth, the equator. In Ecuador, there's this very famous tourist spot of latitude 00, and they call it the center of the world. And you can stand there and take your photo. So those sort of things mean a lot to me. And what I'm driving at there is that also the Ecuadorian flag is the primary colors, the red, yellow, and blue. Yeah, and those colors, as we know, make up all these colors. And so to me, it's like, it's kind of like in a kind of fun and maybe superficial way, I don't know, it's sort of saying, I'm going to kind of be true to what I know, so I'm going to stick to these primaries and explore colors that way. But in doing that, it's been fun because I'm learning how to make colors. Like I'll now look at a color and go, okay, I just need this amount of blue and this amount of yellow and maybe add a bit of this and that, and then I'll get that color. So it's caused me to really understand colors more and more as I'm going, So I'll go with that method, and I use the paints. I was using brands. I was using Gamblin, which is a really good oil paint from out of the States. I really liked their ethos of how they were doing things, but I've been now transitioning to this brand here, which is called Michael Harding. They're from England. They've got a real traditional way of making oil paints, a very, very old school traditional way of making great oil paints as well.
Okay, so, Michael Harding, was it?
Michael Harding, yeah. So I've been transitioning to that now. And yeah, it's great paint. There's and then when it comes to brushes is a big thing. I've been strictly using rosemary brushes, which are a very, very popular paintbrush within the art world. Like it's almost like they've just become so popular where everyone just knows they're going to be mentioned. Like if you ask artists out there, so what brush do you use? It's almost everyone's sort of just waiting to hear rosemary because they're that popular. Okay. Yeah, they make great brushes, handmade brushes from out of Yorkshire. And yeah, you order them online. They may take a little while to get down to Australia, but dude, they are what they say. Like they're great brushes. As in, like what makes a great brush for oil painting? It's like it's got a nice flex to it. It retains its shape, no matter how many times you bust it around with certain brushes that they make, and they've got a few different variants as well. And they're very passionate about making their brushes, and it tells when you use them. So yeah, man. So that's, to me, it's one of those things where I like to. And I think it comes from my skateboarding as well. It's like if I'm going to do something, I want to be able to get my hands onto some of the best quality gear that I can get. That's reputable amongst the culture as well. And then look into the ethos of what they do and see the background of who they are and what makes them so good, where they're getting made as well. And that's what I like about, say, handmade brushes. They're hand making them. And if they're short on, I don't know, the type of wood they use, then they have to tell people, hey, we can't be making this right now because they're not mass producing. So they're very passionate about what they're giving out to the people. It's like they're giving people a gift,
That's cool.
Not
a lot of things like that these days anymore, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love, and they've got a heritage of knowing what their craft is about, which is wonderful. And that's, so I veer towards that realm of things, And when it comes to like how the application of it all, like as you were saying, like it's the medium, trying to get around with it and how do you apply it. It's one of the, for me, it's one of those things where I lay the base colors down. People call it like lean over fat or fat over lean, basically meaning if you do lean over fat, it's like you start off thinner and then you get thicker as you go, it gets fatter. And some people do fat over lean, where it's like you go thick with the paint and you just go hard, and then you start getting a bit more detail-y and thinner with some of the details. So for me, it's to me at the moment with what I've been working on, I muck around with a few different textures where I've worked a little bit with even just with palette knives or just brushes. But if I want to go with that more realistic sort of stuff, then I'll go fairly lean, but kind of a texture on the, I love seeing the texture as well, because the thing with oil painting, you can go fully detailed to the point where you can basically get every little detail, and that would mean you're going to get something that looks like a photo basically, but then it's like, well, you may as well, I'm thinking it's cool, it's going to look rad, but you could kind of may as well just take a photo, unless there's like an interesting subject and it's something so awesome to look at that you just think it's out of this world. That's a different thing, but for me at the moment, it's like, I love seeing some of the texture of the paint come through, even though if you look at it from a distance, it may look so photorealistic, but the more you go up to it, it's like you start seeing all the strokes and all the texture going on. I'm enjoying that a lot at the moment.
So do you take many photos? Do you shoot much in terms of like for creatively, or do you just shoot your portraits and things like that to
like I do shoot a lot of photos. Like I love being able to shoot the photos with the cameras that I've got. Sony have been really generous towards me with some of the camera gear that I've got, and I love going out and being able to capture imagery. And during, like when I was transitioning from skateboarding to being a full-time artist, I held down a few random jobs. It was about a period of maybe 3 or 4 years. I was working as a maintenance dude, landscaper, and doing some high-end photo retouching. So I was working with some, really good photographers. They'd be giving me their photos, and I was, going into Lightroom and touching them up and doing all this sort of stuff. And I found that a lot of fun. But I'd never explored much with the camera and taken the photos. But being around that sort of creative side of things, I always wanted to. Whereas now, with the fact that I've got some great camera gear now, I'm able to go, okay, sweet. If I see something really cool, I can learn about the camera and the mechanics and capture a good photo that I want to paint. Or if I've got an idea, I can set something up and put it together and get the lighting right, and then use that as a subject to paint. And even just taking photos on their own and having a photo as a piece of artwork is beautiful as well. So I really enjoy it. Yeah.
What about digital art? Do you muck around with the Adobe suite at all, or
a little bit?
Work with Illustrator, or
yeah, I know how to use a bit of that. I enrolled in a graphic design course, and I said to myself, I'm going to enroll in this course. I'm going to stay there till they teach me the basics, and then I'm going out.
Yeah, and then you got to bail.
Yeah, and I did. Because that was my intent. It's like I just got to learn these foundational things, and then I'll run off that. I wasn't there to get a certificate or anything. So they taught me, foundations of some Photoshop and Illustrator, and I did that, and then I just got the programs and started mucking around with those things. But when it comes to digital artwork now, if I am going to do anything, or if I have mucked around with some digital art, it's been Procreate at the moment.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
on the iPad Pro, which is a fun little thing as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've had a bit of a muck around with that. A friend of mine's got that.
Yeah.
So what's coming up? I mean, for the next, where's Sid Tapia heading over the next, year or so? What are your plans? What are you thinking of?
Yeah, man. Well, at the moment, I've started that transition has been coming about with the oil painting, which is something I wanted. When I started oil painting back when I did start, that was the plan back then, was to start transitioning from doing a lot of oil paintings. Definitely also because I love being at home close to the family.
For
That's
sure,
like
man.
a major draw card, hence the studio upstairs from where we live. And then, and to, go out and do some like murals and stuff, like, maybe once a month, or maybe, if I need to do more, than so be it, or if there's a bit of a gap, great. But the plan, Lord willing, is to be able to start putting out, getting some more portraiture work and oil painting.
Yeah.
So like forecasting, yeah, that's what I'd like to be doing a whole lot more of. Portraiture work, and definitely like loving that whole aspect of the prizes as well. Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with the Leicester Prize. Dude, I felt like I won the moment they said I got told. The moment they said you're in as a final, I was like, dude, I'm like, I already felt like I won. That was was a big thing for me, man. Like, that's massive. That's good enough for me,
Considering you've only been playing around for 2 years with the with oils, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah, man, I was so psyched on that, and I really am. So I want to do more of that. I love the fact that you can submit, artwork into a prize and they have a look at it. So I want to do some more of that when I get the time. So the plan at the moment is, when I get the commissions, great. Keep painting murals. That brings in some money to be able to, obviously provide for the family and get some time to work on oils. And yeah, man. So yeah, Lord willing, just get some more commissions for some portraiture work, or some more opportunities to paint.
Maybe
And
in the Archibald next. Is it
yeah,
the
I've been
Archibald?
asked. Yeah, I've been asked about that, like that I should submit into that, and I'm thinking of doing that. I've got some ideas there as well. But yeah, that's the plan, and to keep skateboarding and just to keep progressing with what I can with the ability that my body has at the moment with skateboarding, because that's one of the biggest things in my life when it comes to what I nerd out on. Like when it comes to what I'm watching on the screen, it's always skateboarding, and so yeah, man, it's that, and that's the plan, and obviously to keep flourishing with the family, and even looking at maybe doing some stuff online, like maybe like a channel of sorts, like a YouTube channel, but that would be more along the lines of just chatting and talking about life, in the hope of being able to encourage people, be it young people, old people, whatever.
Yeah.
Just being able to bring the experiences that I have in my life and things that have taught me, in the hope of being able to encourage people and maybe get people to explore a bit more with the things that they've got within their life. And yeah, that's something that I've just started just yesterday, actually chatting with Anime about it a lot, just wanting to serve people with the things that I believe I've learned in life and that I have to offer. You know what I mean? And if that's through stories I can tell regarding, certain subjects that I may be working through, or things that I believe I've accomplished in regards to, in regards to character traits, for example, like, for example, if I'm going to talk about contentment, what does contentment mean? How does that play out in my life? And what references do I have within my life that speak on this subject of contentment, and how can that, and have that, speak about certain things like that for a couple of minutes and put those things out there. So I'm thinking of probably doing something like that, maybe on a weekly basis, in the hope to be able to encourage people and just spread more love that way.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, man. I'd be for sure subscribing to that channel if it was up, for sure. Yeah, man.
Cool. Right.
Well, listen, dude, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I could talk to you. I could talk to you all night. You're a really interesting guy, and I really appreciate you coming on here and letting us know a little bit about yourself and about your art, man. So I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it.
Oh, bro, dude, I'm stoked. I'm really pumped that we could do this, man. And the fact that we've crossed paths, and that's a real special story that you shared with me. It encourages me, because I know back in that day when you would have seen me hanging and all this sort of stuff, like, as much as I was doing what I was doing, I was definitely going through a lot more crazier stuff, man, that we didn't sort of touch on all the time. But like what was going on behind the scenes around that time in my life was extremely dark. And to hear that I was actually, it was almost like another life in a way, you know, like to hear that I was able to help you out in that way, it just encourages me to go, okay, well that was cool, because I know of all the other uncool things that I did as well.
Yeah.
You know? So,
well, that's the thing, man. Sometimes the smallest positive thing can create the most light, you know, into the future. Even if you're embroiled in a lot of darkness, you can just do one nice thing for someone. It can make waves, you know, years down the line. So, and that's the beauty of positivity in a lot of ways, man. It seems to grow, and negativity seems to shrink it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But yeah, dude. No, and also like just this has been a real honor. You know, I listen to so many podcasts, and to be doing one like this. Ryan's was the first one. This one's the second one. I'm like, it's really lovely to be able to share like this, man. I appreciate you giving me so much of your time as well to do what you're doing as well. It's awesome,
no
man.
Problems. I hope we can one day again do it in the future.
Yeah, and it would be good to hook up.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, once all this crazy shit's over, and we can get out and hang out for sure, man.
Yeah, definitely. That would be rad. I'd really like that. That would be rad. I really like that.